The world is witnessing a disturbing acceleration in the number, speed, and scale of broken climate records. At this moment, more than 86 days have been recorded with temperatures exceeding 1.5 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels this year. Not only was September the hottest month ever, it also exceeded the previous record by an unprecedented 0.5 degrees centigrade, with global average temperatures at 1.8 degrees centigrade above the pre-industrial levels. These records were accompanied by devastating climate events, which the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change (IPCC) has warned us are merely a meek beginning. While the records do not imply that the world has exceeded the 1.5 degree centigrade temperature limit specified in the Paris Agreement, which refers to global warming levels based on multi-decadal averages, they signal that we are getting closer. Hi, my name is Dr. Shruti Sharma, and today I'm going to give you the key takeaways of Emission Gap Report 2023, which is a stock take of broken records. United Nations Environmental Programme, UNEP, has released a report titled the Emission Gap Report 2023. Let's look at the key highlights of the report. The first is the temperature rise trajectory. Current pledges under the Paris Agreement set the world on a course of 2.5 to 2.9 degrees centigrade temperature rise above pre-industrial levels by the end of the century. Paris Agreement, also known as Conference of Parties 21 or COP28, is a landmark environmental accord that was adopted in 2015 to address climate change and its negative impacts. To limit warming to 1.5 to 2 degrees centigrade, substantial emission cuts of 28 to 42% by 2030 are necessary, the report highlights. Second takeaway is the global emission trends. Greenhouse gas emissions hit a new record of 57.4 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent in 2022, with 1.2 increase from the previous year. Fossil carbon dioxide emissions account for approximately two-thirds of current GHG emissions using 100-year global warming potentials. According to multiple datasets, fossil carbon dioxide emissions grew between 0.8 to 1.5% in 2022 and were the main contributor to the overall increase in GHG emissions. In 2022, fluorinated gases emissions grew by 5.5%, followed by methane at 1.8% and nitrous oxide at 0.9%. GHG emissions across the G20 also increased by 1.2% in 2022. However, members vary widely in the trends, with increases in China, India, Indonesia, and the United States of America, but decreases in Brazil, the European Union, and Russian Federation collectively. The G20 accounts for 76% of the global emission. Now, the report also looks at the emission from major economic sectors. Emissions can be split into 5 major economic sectors: energy supply, industry, agriculture, and land use change, and forestry. Transport and buildings. In 2022, energy supply was the largest source of emission at 20.9 gigaton carbon dioxide equivalent, 36% of the total, followed by industry, followed by agriculture, transport, and building. Emission Gap Report focuses on mitigation effort. If current policies and pledges continue, global warming will likely reach 3 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels by the end of the century. Implementing unconditional nationally determined contributions, which are NDCs, could limit the rise to 2.9 degrees centigrade, while conditional NDCs might cap it at 2.5 degrees centigrade. The report highlights on net zero pledges. Although countries have made net zero pledges, none of the G20 countries are reducing emissions at a pace consistent with their targets. Even the most optimistic scenario, the likelihood of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade is only 14%. There are various progress and challenges, the report states. Policy progress since the Paris Agreement has reduced the implementation gap, but is not sufficient. 9 countries updated their NDCs, potentially reducing emissions by about 9% annually by 2030. However, further reductions are essential to establish least cost pathways for limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade. Now, what are the recommendations to bridge the emission gap? The first is low carbon development. There is a need for global low carbon development transformations, especially focusing on the energy transition. The extraction and planned use of fossil fuels for exceed the carbon budget for meeting temperature goals. Support and financing is important. Countries with greater capacity and responsibility for generating emissions will need to take more ambitious actions and provide financial and technical support to developing nations. Now, low and middle income countries, which already account for more than 2/3 of global emissions, must meet their legitimate development needs and aspirations with low emission growth trajectory. Now, the last one is carbon dioxide removal, CDR. Carbon dioxide removal will be needed more in the future. However, there are many risks with the new methods of carbon dioxide removal. One of the main ones being that the technology isn't in place yet. Essentially, the longer we wait, the harder it's going to be. The world needs to lift the needle out of the groove of insufficient action and begin setting new records on cutting emissions, green and just transition, and climate finance starting now. Now, what are the initiatives to reduce emissions we are taking in India? There are various initiatives like Bharat Stage 4, which is BS4, to Bharat Stage 6, which is BS6 emission norms. Ujala Scheme, International Solar Alliance, National Action Plan on Climate Change, ethanol blending in India, by 2025, the target set. India has also updated its NDCs to align with the emission gap. Change must come faster in the form of economy-wide low-carbon development transformation with a focus on the energy transition. Countries with greater capacity and responsibility for emissions will need to take more ambitious action and provide financial and technical support to developing nations. Low and middle income countries, which already account for more than 2/3 of the global emission, should meet their development needs with lower emission growth, which would provide universal access to energy, lift millions out of poverty, and expand strategic industries. The first global stocktake, concluding at COP28 in Dubai this year, will inform the next round of NDCs, which are nationally determined contributions, which will set new national emission targets for 2035. Ambition in these NDCs must bring greenhouse gas emissions in 2035 to level consistent with the 2 degree centigrade and 1.5 degree centigrade pathways. Stronger implementation in this decade will help to make this possible. As we navigate the challenges ahead, let us view this report not as a discouragement but as a catalyst for change. Together, we have the power to bridge the emission gap, protect our planet, and secure a sustainable future for generations to come. The time for action is now.